The captain's heart stopped at 18,000 feet over the Arizona desert. Flight 847 from Los Angeles to Dallas, carrying 205 passengers and 6 crew members, suddenly had no one flying it. The first officer was unconscious from hitting her head during the captain's collapse. In the cabin filled with business executives, doctors, and military veterans, the only person capable of landing the Boeing 737 was a 16-year-old girl whom passengers had been treating like a child who needed coloring books to stay entertained during the flight. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. 16-year-old Skylar Bennett slouched in seat 19F, her oversized hoodie pulled up, earbuds dangling around her neck, and a battered copy of a fantasy novel open on her lap. To every adult on Flight 847 she was invisible, just another teenager probably skipping school, definitely not worth a second thought. The flight attendant had smiled at her with that particular brand of condescension reserved for unaccompanied minors. "Sweetie, would you like some apple juice? Or maybe some cookies?" "Water's fine, thanks," Skylar had replied politely. "Of course, honey. And if you need anything at all, you just press this little button here, okay?" The woman had pointed to the call button as if Skylar were 5 years old and had never seen a plane before. The businessman in 19E hadn't even glanced at her. To him she was furniture, irrelevant, ignorable, beneath notice. When his laptop cord got tangled with her backpack strap, he'd huffed impatiently and moved it without a word, as if she were an inanimate obstacle rather than a person. The elderly couple in front of her had turned around once, smiling kindly. "Flying alone, dear? Your parents must be very brave to let you travel by yourself. What grade are you in?" "Sophomore," Skylar had answered, playing the role they expected. "Oh, how wonderful. And where are you headed?" "Dallas. Visiting my aunt." "Well, you're being such a good, quiet girl. Not like some teenagers." The woman had patted her hand before turning back around. "Good, quiet girl." The labels adults always used when they meant safely insignificant. What none of them knew, what none of the 211 people on Flight 847 could possibly have imagined, was that Skylar Bennett had more advanced flight training than most private pilots twice her age. Her father, Lieutenant Colonel James Bennett, had flown Apache helicopters in Afghanistan for 12 years before a training accident left him with a severe back injury that ended his military career. Unable to fly combat missions anymore, he'd become a civilian flight instructor, channeling his frustration and expertise into teaching his daughter everything the military had taught him, and then some. Her mother, Dr. Rachel Bennett, was an aerospace engineer who'd worked on Boeing's flight control systems for 15 years. Between her mother's technical knowledge and her father's tactical expertise, Skylar had received an education in aviation that most commercial pilots would envy. While her classmates were learning to drive cars, Skylar was learning to fly planes. While they were cramming for algebra tests, she was memorizing emergency checklists. While they were posting TikTok videos, she was logging simulator hours in her father's home setup, a professional-grade system that cost more than most people's cars and could replicate any emergency scenario imaginable. "The military taught me that hope isn't a strategy," her father had told her during one particularly intense training session. "Preparation is a strategy. Knowledge is a strategy. When something goes wrong at 18,000 feet, you don't have time to figure it out, you need to already know what to do." So Skylar had learned. Emergency descents. Engine failures. Electrical fires. Hydraulic malfunctions. Communication blackouts. Her father had thrown every crisis scenario at her, made her practice until her responses were automatic, drilled procedures into her muscle memory until she could execute them while exhausted, stressed, and scared. "Why are you doing this?" she'd asked once, after a particularly grueling 6-hour session that left her mentally drained. Her father had looked at her with eyes that had seen too much combat. "Because the universe doesn't care if you're ready. It doesn't care if you're trained. When crisis comes, it just comes. And I'd rather you be overprepared and never need it than underprepared when you do." Her mother had contributed the technical knowledge, how aircraft systems actually worked, what the instruments meant, why certain procedures existed. Between them, they'd created a training program that would have impressed the FAA if it weren't being conducted on a 16-year-old girl in her garage. But Skylar had learned to hide this knowledge. At school she never mentioned it. Her friends knew her dad was a former military pilot, but they had no idea of the extent of her training. She discovered that teenagers who knew too much about technical subjects made adults uncomfortable. They either dismissed it as showing off or found it vaguely threatening to their authority. So she'd become expert at playing the role everyone expected, typical teenager. Phone obsessed. Socially awkward. Easily dismissed. Let them think she was just another kid killing time on a flight, probably texting friends about some high school drama. The truth was that from the moment she'd boarded Flight 847, her trained awareness had been operating on autopilot. She'd noted the aircraft type, Boeing 737-800. She'd registered the engine sounds during takeoff, both turbofans operating normally. She'd felt the banking angles during the turn toward Dallas, standard rate turns properly executed. She'd even estimated their current altitude and airspeed based on cabin pressure changes and engine pitch, right around 18,000 feet, cruising at approximately 450 knots. All of this processed in the background of her mind while she appeared to be reading her fantasy novel. Because that was the game: blend in, stay invisible, let them underestimate you. It was 2:23 p.m. Pacific Time when Flight 847 leveled off at its assigned cruising altitude of 18,000 feet, following the southern route from Los Angeles to Dallas. Captain Michael Torres, a 28-year veteran with over 25,000 flight hours, sat in the left seat running through the cruise checklist. First Officer Jessica Park, younger but highly capable, monitored the navigation systems. "Smooth flight today," Park commented. "Weather's clear all the way to Dallas." "Let's hope it stays that way," Torres replied. "I could use an uneventful." He never finished the sentence. The massive heart attack struck without warning. Captain Torres's eyes widened, his left hand clutched at his chest, and before Park could even register what was happening, he slumped forward against the control yoke. The aircraft's nose pitched down sharply as Torres's dead weight pushed the controls forward. "Captain?" Park grabbed his shoulder, trying to pull him back. Alarms blared as the aircraft entered an uncommanded descent. Park released her seatbelt and used both hands to pull Torres away from the controls while simultaneously trying to level the aircraft with her other hand. It was impossible to do both effectively. Torres was unconscious, his full body weight pushing against the controls. Park managed to pull the aircraft level, but Torres kept slumping forward. She needed help. She needed someone to physically remove the captain from his seat so she could fly the aircraft properly. "Cabin crew, I need immediate assistance in the cockpit," she called through the intercom. Nothing. No response. She tried again. Static. The intercom had chosen this exact moment to malfunction. A rare but not impossible electrical glitch that had knocked out communication between cockpit and cabin. Park reached for the cockpit door control to unlock it manually and call for help. But as she stretched to reach it while still trying to support Torres's weight, her head struck the edge of the overhead panel with a sickening crack. Stars exploded in her vision. Disoriented, she tried to maintain her grip on Torres, but the blow had left her dizzy and confused. She reached for the door control again, missed, and then, darkness. First Officer Park slumped sideways, unconscious from the head trauma. The aircraft, now with both pilots incapacitated, began to respond to the only input it had: Captain Torres's dead weight pushing forward on the control yoke. The nose dipped. The descent began. And no one in the cabin had any idea that Flight 847 was now flying itself toward disaster. Skylar felt it before anyone else did. The subtle change in engine pitch. The slight forward tilt that most passengers wouldn't notice. The change in air pressure that indicated a descent, but not the gradual descent of a planned approach. This was steeper, uncontrolled. Her training kicked in automatically. She pulled out her earbuds and sat up straight, every sense suddenly alert. Around her, passengers continued reading, sleeping, scrolling through phones. They hadn't noticed yet. But Skylar had. The businessman next to her frowned and looked at his laptop screen, which had slid slightly forward on his tray table. "Are we descending already?" Skylar didn't answer. She was listening, analyzing. The engines hadn't changed power settings, they were still in cruise configuration. But the aircraft was descending. That meant someone had pushed the nose down or no one was flying the plane. The angle steepened. Now other passengers were noticing. Concerned murmurs rippled through the cabin. Someone pressed their call button. Then another. Then several more. The senior flight attendant, a woman named Margaret with 30 years of experience, picked up the intercom phone to call the cockpit. Skylar watched her expression change from mild concern to confusion to worry. She hung up and tried again. Nothing. She tried a third time. Still nothing. Margaret's training told her something was very wrong. The pilots weren't responding and the aircraft's behavior was abnormal. She moved quickly toward the cockpit door and knocked firmly. "Captain Torres?" "First Officer Park." Nothing. She knocked harder. "Cockpit, this is cabin crew. Please respond." Silence. The descent was becoming more noticeable now. Passengers were starting to panic. Someone screamed. A baby started crying. The murmurs turned into frightened conversations. Margaret tried her access code to unlock the cockpit door. She entered it carefully. The door remained locked. She tried again. Nothing. The door control wasn't responding. Another electrical glitch, perhaps related to whatever had knocked out the intercom. "What's happening?" a passenger demanded, his voice rising with panic. "Please remain calm and seated," Margaret replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But inside she was terrified. No response from the cockpit. Door won't open. Aircraft descending abnormally. This was nightmare territory. Skylar unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Miss, please sit down," the businessman next to her said automatically. Skylar ignored him and moved into the aisle, heading toward the front of the aircraft. Her trained mind was already analyzing the situation, calculating possibilities, assessing options. Margaret saw her coming, a teenage girl in an oversized hoodie, looking scared like everyone else. "Honey, please return to your seat. We're handling this." "What's the situation?" Skylar asked directly, her voice calm and level. "That's not your concern, sweetie. Please." "The aircraft is in an uncommanded descent," Skylar interrupted. "The angle is approximately 4 degrees nose down, which means either someone in the cockpit is pushing forward on the yoke or no one is flying at all. Your pilots aren't responding and I'm guessing your door controls aren't working. Am I right?" Margaret stared at this teenager in shock. Who are you?" "My name is Skylar Bennett. My father is Lieutenant Colonel James Bennett, former Apache pilot and current flight instructor. My mother is Dr. Rachel Bennett, aerospace engineer for Boeing. I have over 400 logged flight hours and extensive emergency training. If something is wrong with your flight crew, I can help." "You're 16 years old," Margaret said, though her voice was less certain now. "Yes. And I'm probably the most qualified person on this aircraft right now to assist whoever's in that cockpit. So I'm asking you again, what's the situation?" Before Margaret could respond, they both heard it, a thud from inside the cockpit, followed by another alarm sound. "We need to get this door open," Skylar said urgently. "Do you have emergency access tools?" Margaret hesitated for only a second. The aircraft was still descending. The pilots weren't responding. And this teenager was speaking with a knowledge and confidence that didn't match her age. "Forward galley," Margaret said. "Emergency access kit. Get it? Now." While Margaret retrieved the kit, Skylar examined the door mechanism. She'd studied these systems with her mother, how they worked, what could malfunction, how to bypass them in emergencies. "There's a manual override," Skylar explained when Margaret returned with the toolkit. "The electronic lock has failed, but we can mechanically release it. Hand me the panel tool." Margaret gave her the tool and Skylar went to work. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, removing the access panel and working the mechanical release mechanism. Within 90 seconds she'd bypassed the electronic lock. The door swung open. The scene inside made Skylar's blood run cold. Captain Torres was slumped forward, unconscious, his weight pushing the control yoke down. First Officer Park was collapsed sideways, also unconscious, a visible bruise forming on her forehead. The aircraft was flying itself toward disaster, descending steadily with no one at the controls. "Medical emergency," Skylar shouted back into the cabin. "I need anyone with medical training up here immediately." A man in his 50s rushed forward. "I'm a paramedic. Check the first officer first, she has head trauma." Then the captain. Skylar was already moving to the first officer's seat, her training overriding any fear or hesitation. She slid into the seat and immediately assessed the situation. Altitude, 14,200 feet and decreasing. Airspeed, 380 knots and increasing. Heading, still on course. Autopilot, disengaged. Manual flight mode. Her hands found the controls as if they'd been waiting for this moment. She pulled back gently on the yoke, feeling the aircraft respond. The nose came up. The descent slowed. At 13,800 feet she leveled off. "Altitude stabilized," she announced, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. The paramedic was checking First Officer Park's pupils. "She's unconscious. Possible concussion. Breathing and pulse are stable." "And the captain?" "No pulse. I think he's had a heart attack. I'm starting CPR." Skylar's mind raced through options. Both pilots incapacitated. She was flying the aircraft. She needed to get them on the ground as quickly as possible. The captain needed advanced medical care and she needed help. She looked at the navigation display, calculating distances. Phoenix was approximately 200 miles to the northeast. It had a major airport with long runways and excellent medical facilities. "Margaret," she called to the flight attendant, who was standing frozen in the cockpit doorway. "I need you to listen carefully. Both pilots are incapacitated. I'm taking command of this aircraft. We're diverting to Phoenix Sky Harbor. I need you to keep the passengers calm and prepare for an emergency landing. Can you do that?" Margaret stared at her. "You're going to fly this plane?" "I'm already flying it," Skylar said calmly. "Now I need to land it. And I need your help to make that happen." Behind Margaret, passengers had crowded toward the front of the aircraft, trying to see what was happening. When they saw a teenage girl in the pilot's seat, several gasped. One man started shouting, "A kid? Are you kidding me? We're all going to die." "Sir, please return to your seat," Margaret said, finding her voice again. "I'm not taking orders from a child." Skylar spun in her seat to face the man directly. Her voice, when she spoke, carried absolute authority. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Bennett's daughter. I have over 400 flight hours. I have been training for emergency situations since I was 12 years old. I am currently the only person on this aircraft capable of landing it safely. So you can either sit down, shut up, and let me focus on keeping you alive, or you can continue panicking and make this situation worse. Your choice. Decide now." The man's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then he slowly backed toward his seat. Skylar turned back to the controls. "Margaret, I need you to make an announcement. Keep it calm. Tell them we're diverting to Phoenix due to a medical emergency with the flight crew, and that a qualified civilian pilot is assisting. Don't mention my age unless someone specifically asks." "Understood." "Understood." As Margaret moved to make the announcement, Skylar turned to the paramedic. "How's the captain?" "I've got a pulse back, but it's weak and thready. He needs immediate advanced cardiac care." "He'll get it. We'll be on the ground in Phoenix in approximately 20 minutes. The paramedic blinked. 20 minutes? Can you really do this? Skylar's hands moved across the controls, adjusting heading, setting up for the approach to Phoenix. "I'm about to find out." With both pilots incapacitated and the paramedic busy keeping Captain Torres alive, Skylar was truly alone in the cockpit. No co-pilot to call out altitudes. No experienced aviator to guide her through procedures. Just her, the aircraft, and 211 lives depending on her training. She took a deep breath and began. "Phoenix approach, this is Flight 847 declaring an emergency." Her voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the fear coursing through her veins. The response came back immediately. "Flight 847, Phoenix approach. State your emergency." "Both pilots are incapacitated. Captain suffered cardiac arrest. First officer is unconscious with head trauma. I am a civilian pilot with extensive training, currently in command of the aircraft. Requesting immediate priority vectors to Phoenix Sky Harbor and emergency medical standing by." There was a pause. "Flight 847. Can you confirm you said both pilots are incapacitated?" "Affirmative. Captain Torres is receiving CPR. First Officer Park is unconscious. I am Skylar Bennett, civilian pilot, 400 flight hours, instrument rated. I am capable of flying and landing this aircraft, but I need your guidance." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood, Flight 847. We're going to get you down safely. Squawk 7700 for emergency. What is your current altitude and position?" "Squawking 7700. Currently at 14,000 feet, approximately 180 miles west-southwest of Phoenix. Heading 055. Roger, Flight 847. Maintain 14,000 feet. Turn right heading 075. You're cleared direct to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. We're going to walk you through this step by step." "Copy." Turning to heading 075. Skylar's hands moved smoothly on the controls, banking the aircraft into a gentle right turn. On the ground, the controller, a veteran named Jack Morrison who'd handled thousands of emergencies in his 20-year career, was already coordinating with his supervisor. "We've got a civilian pilot flying a 737 with 211 people aboard. Both flight crew are down." "Who's flying?" his supervisor asked. "Says her name is Skylar Bennett. Says she's instrument rated with 400 hours. Experience level? Didn't say. But she sounds calm and she's handling the aircraft properly so far." "How old?" Morrison hadn't asked. But something about the voice made him wonder. "I don't know. Does it matter? Get every available resource on this. I want our best controllers on frequency. I want emergency services on standby. I want... Sir, with respect, what I need is time to talk this pilot down. Age and credentials don't matter right now. Either she can fly or she can't. And so far she can. Back in the aircraft, Skylar was dealing with multiple challenges simultaneously. The aircraft wanted to be flown. Systems were functioning normally, but she needed to manage everything alone. Navigation, communication, system monitoring, approach planning. She did what her father had taught her. Prioritize, compartmentalize, execute. Flight 847, descend and maintain 10,000 feet. Reduce speed to 250 knots. Descending to 10,000, reducing to 250 knots. Skylar pulled the throttles back and lowered the nose slightly, beginning a controlled descent. Behind her, Margaret was dealing with the passenger situation. After the announcement, reactions had varied wildly. Some passengers were praying. Some were crying. Some were angry. A few actually seemed impressed. She's just a kid, one woman sobbed. She's a pilot with training, another passenger, an older man with an Air Force patch on his jacket, replied firmly. And right now she's our best option. So let her concentrate. In the cockpit, Skylar was running through mental checklists. Landing at Phoenix would require precise execution. She'd need to configure the aircraft properly, extend flaps and landing gear at the right times, maintain proper approach speed, execute the final approach and landing with no co-pilot to assist. Flight 847, you're approximately 150 miles from Phoenix. At current speed, that's about 25 minutes. We're going to give you vectors for a straight-in approach to runway 25R. It's 11,000 feet long, plenty of room. Wind is currently 240 at 8 knots. Copy. Straight-in approach, runway 25R. That's correct. Now, Skylar, may I call you Skylar? Yes, sir. Skylar, I'm Jack. I've been a controller for 20 years and I've talked dozens of pilots through emergencies. You're doing great. Your voice is calm, your aircraft control is solid, and you're following instructions perfectly. We're going to get you down safely. Do you trust me? Skylar felt tears prick her eyes but kept her voice steady. Yes, sir. I trust you. Good. Now let's talk about what's going to happen. You're familiar with approach procedures? Yes. I've practiced in simulators extensively. Excellent. Have you ever flown a 737 specifically? No, sir. My experience is in smaller aircraft, single and multi-engine props. But I've studied commercial aircraft systems with my mother. She's a Boeing engineer. Understood. The principles are the same, just more aircraft to manage. The 737 is a stable platform. It wants to fly. You just need to guide it. Can you see the approach plate for Phoenix runway 25R? Skylar scanned the cockpit and found the approach charts. Yes, I have it. Perfect. We're going to set you up for a visual approach. You'll fly a standard pattern. We'll give you headings to establish you on final approach about 10 miles from the runway. Then it's just a matter of maintaining centerline and glide path all the way to touchdown. You've done this in simulators, right? Many times. Then you can do it for real. The only difference is that you can't restart if something goes wrong, so we're going to make sure nothing goes wrong. Deal? Deal. The conversation, the calm authority in Jack's voice, helped center Skylar. She wasn't alone. She had guidance. She could do this. Flight 847, descend to 7,000 feet. Maintain 250 knots. Descending to 7,000, maintaining 250. The aircraft descended smoothly. Through the cockpit windows, Skylar could see the Phoenix metropolitan area spreading across the desert landscape ahead. The airport would be visible soon. Behind her, the paramedic had stabilized Captain Torres as much as possible. His heart was beating, but he remained unconscious. First Officer Park was also unconscious but breathing normally. Both needed immediate hospital care. How much longer? The paramedic asked. Approximately 15 minutes to landing, Skylar replied. She's really going to land this thing, Margaret whispered to another flight attendant. A 16-year-old girl is going to land a Boeing 737. Better her than nobody, the other attendant replied grimly. At 7,000 feet, Skylar could clearly see the airport now. Multiple runways, the distinctive layout, emergency vehicles already gathering, tiny dots of red and white at this distance. Flight 847, turn left heading 250. This will establish you on a right base for runway 25R. Turning left to heading 250. The aircraft banked smoothly. Skylar's confidence was building. The 737 handled differently than smaller aircraft. More mass, more momentum, more power, but the fundamental principles were the same. Pitch, power, and trim. The holy trinity of flight. Flight 847, you're looking perfect. 10 miles from the airport. Begin descent to 5,000 feet. Descending to 5,000. This was it. The final approach was beginning. In a few minutes, she'd either save everyone aboard or... She pushed that thought away. Focus on procedure. Focus on execution. One step at a time. Skylar, it's time to configure the aircraft for landing. Do you see the flap control lever? Yes. Center console marked with detents. Exactly. I want you to extend flaps to position 1. Move the lever to the first detent. Skylar moved the lever carefully. The aircraft shuddered slightly as the flaps deployed, creating more lift and drag. The nose wanted to pitch up. She compensated with a gentle forward pressure on the yoke. Flaps 1 extended, maintaining altitude and speed. Beautiful. Perfect compensation. Now turn right heading 280. This will put you on final approach for runway 25R. Skylar executed the turn and suddenly through the windscreen she could see it. The runway stretched out ahead like a narrow ribbon of salvation. I have visual on the runway, she reported. Excellent. You're on final approach, 8 miles from touchdown. Extend flaps to position 5. Another flap extension. Another gentle shudder. More drag, more lift, slower speed. The aircraft was transforming from a fast cruiser into something that could land. Flight 847, reduce speed to 180 knots. Extend flaps to position 15. Skylar pulled back on the throttles, feeling the engine spool down. The aircraft slowed. She extended the flaps further. Speed 180, flaps 15. Perfect. Now, Skylar, at 5 miles I'm going to have you extend your landing gear and go to full flaps. After that, it's all about maintaining your approach. The runway is 11,000 feet long, so you have plenty of room for error. Don't try to be perfect, just get the aircraft on the runway in one piece. Understood. Understood. In the cabin, passengers had stopped talking. They were all looking out windows, watching the ground rise up to meet them. Some were praying. Some were holding hands. All were thinking the same thing. Please let this teenager know what she's doing. 5 miles, Jack's voice came through the headset. Extend landing gear. Flaps to 30. Skylar lowered the landing gear lever. The aircraft shook as the massive wheels deployed. 3 green lights confirmed gear down and locked. Gear down, 3 green lights. Outstanding. Full flaps. She extended the flaps to their maximum landing position. The aircraft slowed further, now at approximately 160 knots. Final approach speed. Flaps full, speed 160 knots. Perfect. Skylar, you're now configured for landing. The runway is right in front of you. Maintain your current descent rate and speed. In about 2 minutes you're going to touch down. Remember, don't try to grease it. Just get it on the ground. The aircraft can handle a firm landing. Copy. 2 minutes. 120 seconds. That's all that stood between 211 people and safety or disaster. Skylar's hands were welded to the controls. Her eyes tracked between the runway ahead and the instruments. Altitude decreasing steadily. Speed stable. Descent rate good. Centerline aligned. She was going to land this airplane. At 1,000 feet, Skylar could see individual markings on the runway. Emergency vehicles lined both sides. Fire trucks, ambulances, foam trucks. A reception committee waiting to see if a teenage girl could save 211 lives. 500 feet, Jack called out, since she had no co-pilot to monitor altitude. Speed on target. Looking perfect. The ground was rushing up now. Skylar's training took over completely. Her conscious mind stepped back and let her muscle memory fly the aircraft. Hours of simulation. Hundreds of practice landings. It all came down to this. 400 feet. Begin looking ahead to the far end of the runway. That's your touchdown point. Skylar's vision shifted from the instruments to the runway. She could see the threshold markers approaching rapidly. 300 feet. Her hands made tiny corrections. A gust of wind tried to push them left. She corrected with gentle aileron input. The centerline stayed locked in her view. 200 feet. Start thinking about your flare. The flare, the critical moment where she'd need to pull back on the yoke to raise the nose and transition from descending to landing. Too early and she'd stall. Too late and she'd slam into the runway. Timing was everything. 100 feet. Throttle to idle. Prepare to flare. Skylar's right hand pulled the throttles back to idle. The engines wound down. The aircraft was now gliding, trading its remaining speed and altitude for a controlled descent to the runway. 50 feet. Almost there. 30 feet. Begin your flare. Easy back pressure. Skylar pulled back on the yoke, raising the nose. The aircraft's descent slowed dramatically as the wings provided maximum lifting ground effect. 20 feet. Hold it. The runway was right there, filling her entire vision. She held the back pressure, feeling for the perfect moment. 10 feet. Keep pulling, keep pulling. And then, thump. The main wheels touched down. Not gently but firmly, a solid landing that compressed the gear struts and sent a jolt through the airframe. The aircraft bounced slightly, maybe 18 inches off the ground, and Skylar's heart stopped. But her hands didn't. She held the yoke position, kept the nose up, and the aircraft settled back down. This time it stayed down. They were on the ground. Deploy thrust reversers. Jack called out. Skylar pulled the thrust reverser levers. The engines roared in reverse, creating massive deceleration force. The aircraft slowed rapidly. Brakes. Steady pressure. She pressed down on the brake pedals with both feet. The aircraft slowed further. The runway was still stretching ahead. They had plenty of room. Speed decreased. 100 knots. 80 knots. 60 knots. You're doing great, Skylar. Just keep slowing down. You've got it. 40 knots. 20 knots. 10 knots. The aircraft rolled to a complete stop, still on the runway with over 7,000 feet of concrete remaining ahead. For a moment, absolute silence filled the cockpit. Then Jack's voice, thick with emotion. Flight 847, you are stopped on runway 25R. Emergency services are approaching. Skylar, you just saved 211 lives. Welcome to Phoenix. Skylar's hands came off the controls and she started shaking violently. The adrenaline that had kept her focused drained away in an instant, replaced by overwhelming emotion. Tears streamed down her face. Behind her, in the cabin, the silence broke. Passengers erupted into applause, cheers, and sobs of relief. People hugged strangers. A man dropped to his knees. A woman was openly weeping while clutching her children. Margaret rushed into the cockpit and wrapped her arms around Skylar. You did it, she whispered. Oh my God, you actually did it. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft. Paramedics boarded within seconds, rushing to Captain Torres and First Officer Park. Both were quickly stabilized and evacuated. Airport officials and FAA representatives came next. They found Skylar still in the pilot's seat, tears streaming down her face, hands trembling but otherwise composed. Are you Skylar Bennett? A man in an FAA uniform asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. How old are you? 16. The man closed his eyes briefly. You just landed a Boeing 737 with 211 people aboard at 16 years old. Yes, sir. I'm sorry if I broke regulations. There was no one else. I had to. You saved 211 lives, he interrupted gently. There's no regulation against that. The next few hours were a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and interviews. Skylar answered every question patiently, explaining her background, her training, her decision-making process during the emergency. Captain Torres was rushed into emergency surgery. First Officer Park regained consciousness and was diagnosed with a moderate concussion but no permanent damage. Both would recover fully, though Torres would need months of cardiac rehabilitation before returning to flying. Skylar's parents were contacted. Her father, when told what happened, sat down hard in his office chair and wept. Her mother chartered a private plane and was on her way to Phoenix within the hour. Meanwhile, word had spread globally. 16-year-old girl lands commercial jet after both pilots collapse. The story was everywhere. Every news channel, every website, every social media platform. The passengers of Flight 847 became instant advocates. They gave interview after interview, praising the teenager who'd saved their lives. The businessman who'd dismissed her as furniture publicly apologized on camera. The elderly couple who'd patted her head now called her a hero. Even the man who'd initially panicked made a public statement thanking her. By evening, Skylar was reunited with her parents in a private room at the airport. Her mother burst through the door and wrapped her in the tightest hug of her life. I thought I'd lost you, she sobbed. When they told me what happened, I thought, I'm okay, Mom. Everyone's okay. Her father rolled up in his wheelchair, unable to stand due to his back injury but absolutely beaming with pride. You used everything we taught you. Everything, Skylar confirmed. The emergency procedures, the mindset training, the stress management, all of it. Dad, it worked. You worked, he corrected. You took knowledge and turned it into action. That's what makes a real pilot. The FAA investigation concluded within a week. The official finding acknowledged that Skylar had technically violated regulations by acting as pilot in command without proper certification. However, given the extraordinary circumstances and the fact that her actions saved 211 lives, no punitive action would be taken. Instead, she received a commendation for civilian bravery, the youngest person ever to receive the honor. The airline offered her something unprecedented: full sponsorship for all remaining flight training, with a guaranteed position as a commercial pilot once she met all legal requirements at age 23, after college graduation. "We don't normally recruit 16-year-olds, the CEO said at a press conference. But Skylar Bennett isn't normal. She's extraordinary. And when she's ready, we'll be honored to have her in our cockpit." Captain Torres, recovering from surgery, requested to meet with Skylar. They met in his hospital room with news cameras recording every moment. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I was told that if you delayed landing even 5 more minutes, I wouldn't have survived. You didn't just save the passengers, you saved me." "I'm just glad I was there," Skylar replied. "And that my dad prepared me for something I hoped would never happen." "Your dad is a good man. And you're an exceptional young woman. When I'm cleared to fly again, I want you as my first officer. Not now, when you're properly certified. But I want the honor of flying with the girl who saved my life." Social media exploded with support. #Skylar the pilot trended worldwide for days. Memes celebrated her achievement. Young girls suddenly had a new role model, not an actress or singer, but a pilot who'd proven that courage and competence have no age requirement. But amid all the attention and praise, Skylar remained remarkably grounded. In an interview 3 days after the landing, a reporter asked her how she felt about being called a hero. "I don't feel like a hero," she said honestly. "I feel like someone who was prepared when preparation mattered. My parents gave me knowledge. The situation gave me opportunity. I just did what needed to be done." "Would you do it again?" "If I had to. But I hope I never have to." "What do you want people to learn from your story?" Skylar thought carefully before answering. "I want people to learn that age doesn't determine capability. Adults dismissed me because I was 16. They called me sweetie and honey and treated me like a child who needed coloring books. They didn't see the hundreds of hours of training, the knowledge, the preparation. They just saw a teenager and assumed incompetence." She paused, then continued. "Young people are capable of far more than adults give them credit for. Don't underestimate us because of our age. Judge us by our actions, our knowledge, our character. And maybe, just maybe, when crisis comes, you'll find that the person who can save you is someone you completely underestimated." 19-year-old Captain Skylar Bennett walked through Denver International Airport in her crisp pilot's uniform, carrying her flight bag toward Gate B-17. Passengers barely glanced at her, just another pilot heading to work. She was the youngest commercial airline captain in history, having completed all her certifications and logged the required hours with unprecedented speed. The airline had kept its promise, offering her a position the moment she was legally qualified. Today's flight, Dallas to Los Angeles. Route 847, the reverse of the flight where she'd made history 3 years earlier. The airline had offered to change the route number, but Skylar had declined. It was part of her story now. First Officer Rodriguez was already in the cockpit when she arrived. He was 53 years old, with 30 years of flying experience, more than twice Skylar's age and thousands more flight hours. "Morning, Captain," he said respectfully. "Morning, Rodriguez. How's the weather looking?" "Clear skies all the way to LA. Should be smooth." They conducted their pre-flight checks together, two professionals preparing to carry 189 passengers safely across the country. Rodriguez never once questioned Skylar's authority or capability. He'd seen her fly. He knew she was real. As passengers boarded, Skylar noticed a teenage girl being escorted to her seat by a flight attendant. The attendant was speaking to her in that condescending tone Skylar remembered so well. "Now, honey, if you need anything, you just press this button here." The girl nodded politely, playing the expected role. But as she passed the cockpit door, her eyes met Skylar's for just a moment. And in that moment, Skylar saw recognition, not of her specifically but of possibility. The girl's eyes said, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." Skylar gave her a slight nod of encouragement before the girl moved on to her seat. 20 minutes later, Flight 847 pushed back from the gate. Skylar's hands moved smoothly across the controls, confident and practiced. 3 years ago, she'd landed a plane under emergency conditions to save 211 lives. Today, she was flying one under normal conditions as a routine part of her job. Tower, Flight 847 ready for departure. Flight 847, cleared for takeoff runway 25R. Fly heading 240, climb and maintain 10,000. Cleared for takeoff 25R. Heading 240, climbing to 10,000. Skylar advanced the throttles, felt the familiar surge of acceleration, and rotated the aircraft smoothly into the Colorado sky. In the cabin, passengers were already settling in, reading, sleeping, scrolling through phones. None of them knew that their captain was barely out of her teens. None of them knew she'd made international headlines 3 years ago. None of them needed to know. Because Skylar Bennett wasn't flying for fame or recognition. She was flying because it was what she'd been born to do, what her parents had prepared her for, and what she loved more than anything else. As they climbed through 18,000 feet, the same altitude where Captain Torres had collapsed 3 years ago, Skylar felt a sense of peaceful completion. She'd come full circle from emergency responder to professional pilot. How does it feel? Rodriguez asked quietly. Flying this route? Feels right, Skylar replied. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And she was. Because sometimes, the smallest hands can guide the largest machines safely home. Sometimes, the person everyone underestimates is the one who saves them all. Sometimes, a 16-year-old girl in an oversized hoodie is exactly the hero the world needs, whether the world realizes it or not. Flight 847 continued smoothly toward Los Angeles, carrying 189 passengers who would arrive safely, completely unaware that they were flying with a legend. And that was exactly how Skylar Bennett wanted it.